I'm so excited. I cannot wait to try these. Hi, Shannon Rowe Jackson here from Caution Artists at Play, and today I am going to be trying out the new golden paints. They are the SoFlat Matte Acrylics. And these are really interesting because this is kind of Golden's version of Acryl-gouache, although they don't advertise it as an Acryl-gouache. They just advertise it as a flat acrylic. And yeah, I got the sets here. There are 40 colors available in the line, but they have these two sets of 6. And I thought that the sets would just be a quick and easy way for me to get a good variety. Oh, this is so cute. They come in these little jars, and they offer, like I said, they offer 40 colors, and they offer them in 2, 4, and 16-ounce jars. They have sets, and then they also have open stock. So I got the 2 sets here, and this is pretty much their basic set. It's got Naphthol Red Light, Cadmium Primrose, Ultramarine Blue, Permanent Green, Black, Titanium White. And then they also have their really fun Zing set. So this one's called Pop, this one's called Zing. And their Zing set has the yellow green, red violet, cadmium orange, Naphthol pink, which I'm pretty excited about that color, bismuth yellow, and cobalt teal. So these are the kind of like fun shades. And then of course these are the basic shades. And all of them have the light fast ratings on them and a color swatch with the actual paint. So something about these that I noticed online, which is really exciting, and I will link all this information in the description below, but all of these colors are really light fast. Out of all of them, the only ones that aren't light fast are their fluorescent range, which the light fastness is not applicable. And that's not unusual. Fluorescents don't tend to be light fast. But the rest of their colors are all between 1 and 2. And out of the rest of their colors, there's only 4 of them in the whole line that are only 2. So the majority of this line is extremely light fast. And they go according to the ASTM ratings, as you can see here. So yeah, these are extremely light fast, which if you follow me, you know that's very important to me. They come with a pamphlet inside, which has all the colors, which is very exciting, and it tells you the light fast ratings of each color. So if you get the set and you want to get more, but you don't know which ones you want to get, this is going to tell you which ones are light fast, and it also gives you an idea of the other colors they have, so you can buy the rest open stock. That's super exciting. Very, very exciting. And it also, online, they have all this information on their website where you can look at their pigment chart. It has all the pigment information and the light fast information right there. And I will have that linked in the description below as well. So yes, I'm very excited about these. So the main claims of these is that they are super matte. They're very opaque, which you can see here. Golden is great in the fact that they always put the lines there and then put the color swatch over it so you can see opacity. And that they naturally flatten out so that it minimizes brush strokes. So we're going to see all that when we work on a project. But the first thing that I want to do, actually I want to open one of these and see what it looks like inside. I don't normally do jars because I'm too messy of a painter to do jars, and I'm always afraid that I'll contaminate them with a different color. So I'm going to have to be very careful with how I use these. But it's sealed for safety, so you know no one's messing around with your paint before you get it. And for freshness. Yeah, okay, so I'll have to see. So one of the things that I want to do, I'm not going to swatch all the colors because I'm not really a swatcher, but I do want to compare these with some of the other acrylics I have. I'm going to compare them with the fluid acrylics by Golden, or the high flow acrylics by Golden, and their regular artist acrylics, which are their heavy body, just to see how they look compared to those, because those are going to be more shiny, less matte than these. But I also want to compare them to some Acryl-gouache that I have from a different brand and some gouache that I have from a different brand, just to see how it looks. So yeah, another one of their claims is that they're not as sensitive of a surface as gouache, meaning they're going to be stronger than gouache. They're not going to crack as easily. They're not going to lift because they are acrylic. Basically similar claims that most acrylic gouache has. But again, they don't really claim it anywhere on their website. I don't see them claiming to be an acrylic gouache. They say it's 100% acrylic. And pretty much their claim is that it's like gouache, but only better, is kind of what I got from their website. So we're going to see how well that works, and then of course we're going to do a project. And I should also mention, this video is not sponsored by Golden or any of the other companies you may see here. I purchased these myself, and yeah, so I'm going to swatch. I don't know if I'll do that off camera or not, but I'll make some swatches and I'll come back and show you how they look compared to other colors. And I think I'll just choose one color and a color that I have in all these different lines that I have and compare them and just kind of see what the surface looks like. And then, of course, I will be doing a project with them so I can get a real feel for these paints. Okay, so here we are. I chose red because this was the only color, the Naphthol red is the only color that I really had across a bunch of different lines. So I have the SoFlat, I have the High Flow, which I'm using the back side of an old swatch that I did, and then I realized that I don't think that this side of this canvas paper is really gessoed as much. So this sunk in a little bit differently because it's really, really liquidy. But it normally doesn't look like that. It usually has much better coverage. But here we are. I just want to test the sheen of all these things. And then I have Liquitex Basics because this tends to be kind of a student grade, although you can get artist quality results and it is archival. But it tends to be more on the matte side to begin with than other acrylics that are out there. And of course, I have the heavy body acrylics, which I put away already. I don't know why, by Golden. And then I have Turner Acryl-gouache. And I also have this really, really old Winsor Newton Designer's gouache, which is very similar in color, so that you can kind of see how it looks. This is still drying a little bit, but down here is dry, so you can kind of see. And so first impressions so far, it is really, really vibrant. I feel like I must have accidentally put more of this acryl gouache down than I meant to. Very similar to the Turner acryl gouache. It's definitely vibrant. Opening the jars is kind of annoying. Really, really messy. I had to go down and wash my hands in between this while I was waiting for these to dry. But it is very, very matte, and I'm hoping you can see how matte that really is. Just like the acryl gouache and the gouache where it's actually dried. And then the Liquitex Basics, which is dry. A little bit more sheen. And then the heavy body is definitely the shiniest. And you can definitely see more brush strokes in these than you can the rest. This had like a big chunk here, so it's a little uneven, but it just kind of gives you a general idea. It definitely looks very close to acryl gouache. But I'll know better when I'm working with it. I feel like I accidentally poured out more of this than I meant to, so it has a little bit more coverage. I do think that if I had a little bit more of a layer on there, it would cover the same as this, because it felt a lot alike. But definitely very matte, definitely going to photograph really easily, which is a huge advantage to having something that is matte. It's going to photograph beautifully. So yeah, I am going to get moving, and I'm going to work on a project, and I'll give you more of my impressions on that. That will be done using time-lapse and voiceover. So I'm in the process of opening all of the rest of them, and what I found to be really strange is that some of them, like the pink one, had a pull tab to make it easier to pull, and then some of them do not. Like the whole first set that I opened, the whole pop set with their basic colors, didn't have this pull tab. And so far, 2 of them in the Zing one have, but this is also from the Zing set, and it doesn't have a pull tab. So, kind of strange. I don't know what that's about. But these ones aren't as easy to open. Some of them have been good. The Naphthol Red was hell to open. Like, that got all over me. So I think that's kind of strange. Maybe they're in the process of moving them all over to the pull tab. They haven't done it yet. I don't know. I just thought that that was really weird. Can I just say that some of these colors are amazing? Like, that's as close to fluorescent as you'll get with it still being light fast. I'm super excited. Definitely more liquidy than I expected too. I'm not going to be able to show you this, I don't think, but this is just like some little makeshift palette that I made. I didn't want to drag out my big one, but it's really more liquidy than I expected, and I ended up pouring out more than I wanted. I guess I'm going to have to scoop it out, but that's going to be hard too. I'm just not a jar person. This is going to be difficult for me. I feel less control with a jar. And I know I can scoop it out with a palette knife and stuff, but I feel like that's just asking for contamination. But that's a personal preference. I'm sure there's plenty of people who have found easier ways to work with jars, but I'm used to having tubes and having a little bit more control over how much I'm putting on the palette. So this should be interesting. I anticipate that being the main challenge for me personally with these paints. Okay, so finally getting to my project now. This is going to be just a fun little seascape with a sunset. I thought that these colors would lend themselves beautifully to a sunset, and so that's how I decided to use this reference. And the reference actually came from a friend. Pro tip, if you're somebody who can't get out and take a lot of photos, but you have friends who travel, ask them to take pictures while they're out and about and for permission to draw and paint them. I have a friend of mine who he and his girlfriend like to go and travel places, and they take photos while they're traveling, and he is generous enough to share them with me with full permission for me to paint them, and so that's where this particular photo came from. So most of the time I work from my own photos, but occasionally I will work from a friend's photo when I have permission. This is definitely not going to be any sort of tutorial on how to paint an ocean, because I realized while I was painting this, it's been a long time since I've painted an ocean, and I'm much better at drawing oceans apparently, because I dealt with a lot of frustration with that, and I'll get into that a little bit later on. Anyways, so I'm starting out with the sky, and the colors that I have here really lend themselves beautifully to this, and that Naphthol pink, that is the star of this show. I love that color. It is now my favorite new sunset color. I'm definitely gonna have to buy a bigger jar. I actually think it's already on back order. It's a fantastic color, and it's unique, and it's different than any colors that I've seen in other lines, and so I'm definitely gonna get more of that. Definitely great for sunsets, because that is one of those colors that can be hard to mix and really get the vibrancy that you want. And I fell in love with this color. And of course the oranges and yellows really helped as well, and then the pops of purple really kind of lent themselves to this sunset. So I was pretty excited about that. I love painting skies, as you know, and so this really set the painting off with a bang, and I was very happy here. So for the sky, I used 100% of the matte acrylics. Later on, I come through in the ocean, and I end up mixing some of the other colors from my other lines in, because one of the claims is that this paint works well with other acrylics, and so I wanted to see if I'm going to be able to mix these with my other acrylics, the ones that are, you know, more shiny and things like that, without it really causing any issues in the piece. And so you'll see me doing that later on. But let's talk about the vibrancy here. That is the key to this paint, I think. That's the one thing that really stood out to me the most. As I said, that pink is amazing, but all the other colors are really vibrant as well. And like I mentioned in the beginning, it's really rare to find things that vibrant and still have them be light fast. And so I found that to be very exciting. And the color selection in these sets was a lot of fun, especially the, well, I don't know, I like them both. The Zing and the Pop sets are both a lot of fun. However, the line itself does have a lot of colors that are more earth tones and not just vibrant colors. So if you're somebody who likes to do regular landscapes or non-sunset type landscapes, I guess I should say, there are other color options. They have a pretty good selection of browns and different kind of like yellow ochre colors and greens and things like that. And so you don't have to just get the most vibrant colors. They do have other selections out there. These sets tended to be a little bit more on the vibrant side, though one of the sets was more of just your regular colors. They still tended to be more towards the vibrant side. But I kind of wanted that. I wanted to see how well they pop, and they definitely pop. And so I'm starting on the ocean now, and I'm just gonna forewarn you. I'm laying in the groundwork for the ocean right now, and later on you're gonna kind of see it jump to having quite a bit done, and it's gonna look a little different. And that's because after some of this footage, there was more footage where I had painted the whole ocean, and I hated it. And so I painted over it. And so you're going to see it kind of jump from this section to where it was already painted over, and so that's why it's going to look a little different in a little while. And that's when I decided to bring in the other paint to see how well it mixes with it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why I ended up making that switch, and a little bit about one of the qualities of this paint. And so one of the qualities of this paint is the fact that it flattens out on its own. I mean, it's supposed to be flat paint. However, what that does when you're trying to do a fine line is it kind of widens the line a little bit. And so when I was putting the lines in for the distant waves in the ocean, they ended up getting a little bit flattened out and widening out. And I didn't like that. And so it ended up looking a little bit messier than I wanted because the lines weren't as fine as I wanted. So that's something to keep in mind if you're wanting to do fine lines with this paint. It's kind of interesting because this paint is thin enough to create fine lines. However, if you have a loaded brush because you're trying to do long fine lines, it might come off and it might flatten out a little bit wider than expected. So that was something that I didn't really think about ahead of time. I knew that they were supposed to flatten out. Didn't really think about how gravity played into that. And of course, if you put water on something, it's going to flatten out. It's similar to that because it's thin enough to do that. So that's one reason why I went through and I did some of this detail, and then I ended up switching. And here you can kind of see that switch. And that's why a lot of it looks done, and that's because I really actually had finished the ocean, sort of, but I hated it. I struggled so hard with that. However, it did give me the opportunity to try out other paints with this. So I ended up using some of my Liquitex Basics, some of my Daler Rowney System 3s, which are my most used paint probably. And I also used some of the Golden High Flow Acrylics. And so that ended up being pretty interesting. They do work well with other acrylics, like they claim. The one thing that I did notice, though, is if you're using a really glossy acrylic with it, it really, really stands out against the matteness, which is to be expected, which you could use for certain effects if you want to. And you'll see that later on in the dark wave that's just to the left of my hand. I end up coming through with some of my Golden High Flow Acrylics and painting the dark wave in just to see, and you'll see you'll see a glare on it. And then later on, I came through with the SoFlat Acrylics, and it only took one layer to go over that dark wave and put it right back to matte again. So that's something to really, really keep in mind. I think that was great. It really only took one layer. So the opacity of these paints is pretty good, which is kind of difficult for people who like to glaze, like me. I like thin layers, I like glazing, which is a technique that I use often in my ocean scenes, which is another reason why I think I struggled. You can get some subtle glazes, but because they're matte and because they're opaque, it really is just not ideal for glazing methods. You really want to use your more transparent, glossier paints for that probably. Like the Liquitex Basics, those tend to be more on the matte side. However, they're thin enough and transparent enough that when you add a little water or a little medium, you can get a nice thin glaze over your painting with them. However, like these ones, they're definitely matte, and they tend to dull the colors below a lot more than a regular glaze would. And so that was one reason why I think I struggled a little bit in the ocean. Also, because these are so bold and so opaque, it's really hard to get subtle transitions sometimes. I actually struggled with that a little bit more than I normally would in the sky, and I definitely noticed it in the ocean. These would be great for pointillism, I think, where you use the little dots of color and they can just contrast against each other because of the fact that they're so bold. And yeah, I had a harder time getting a gradient with it because of that. But you know, they are supposed to be flat, so that's part of their appeal, probably. However, these are all things to, you know, just kind of keep in mind while you're working, and you can actually use them to your advantage. I like the fact that they're opaque. Now you can kind of see that glare in that wave. It ended up being covered so easily with the SoFlat. I loved that. So the opacity really is an advantage. It's just something to keep in mind if you're used to working with transparent paint like I am. So I did read that these can be sprayed in an airbrush. I have yet to try that, but I can see that being possible because they are definitely a thinner kind of paint. And so I don't think it would take much effort if you mixed in some airbrush medium to get it to be thin enough and not clog your airbrush. However, after this dries on the palette, I find it much harder to peel off. Like a lot of my other acrylic paints, I can just peel them right off the palette. This, it really stayed on there, and so, especially the plastic palettes. So if you're going to use it in your airbrush, really thoroughly clean that airbrush, which you're supposed to do anyways, but some of us are a little bit more lax on it than others. Really thoroughly clean it, because I can see it getting caked on more easily and causing clogging down the road. So I am mainly a realism artist, and I had a hard time because I found myself fighting the flatness of this, even though they're supposed to be very flat. However, you can get realistic results, as you can see here. This is probably not my most, I don't know, prestigious work that I've done, but I got good results here. I can see these being awesome for abstract art, though, if you're going to use large sections of flat color or illustration where you want that kind of flat color. I could definitely see it being great for that, or mixed media. It does seem to be a pretty versatile paint. And like I said, I'm pretty excited that it works well with my other acrylics. I didn't notice any issues with it mixing with acrylics that are glossier. So like once it was on the surface, it didn't cause a lot of issues. Obviously, the more glossy stuff you use in your mixture, the less matte it's going to be. It didn't take long for the gloss to take these over. However, like I said, if I had a glossy area and I just put the pure matte paint over it, no trouble covering it at all. But as far as mixing them together, not just layering them one on top of the other, I didn't notice any issues on the palette. I didn't really notice any issues. It just felt like working with acrylics all together. And that is something that I found to be really key, because I love some of these colors and I know I'll get a lot more use out of them if I can mix them with the other colors that I have. So that's pretty much my experience on them. I'm very, very excited about the vibrancy. I'm very excited about some of these colors. You don't necessarily see these colors in other lines, nor do you see them being light fast if you do. And so that was very exciting. They're definitely matte. Definitely photographed well, and you could see the comparison when using something glossy. And yeah, I thought they were a lot of fun. They do flatten out. They don't really show your brush strokes. So if you're somebody who works with a palette knife, I do not recommend these. And you just want to be easy on what you're doing with your fine lines, because sometimes they can spread a little bit wider than anticipated. But other than that, I think that they're a wonderful paint. I'm very excited. I'm probably going to buy a few more colors to have in my collection. Definitely going to buy more of that pink. You will see me using this again in sunset pictures for sure. All right, so thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this and you found it helpful. I will see you next time. Bye.